We speak to all the makers and shakers within the tabletop space while having fun and meaningful conversations while we are at it. Now, before we get into tonight's show, you can see my lovely guest here on the overlay. But before we get to it, it is important that I and this channel mention that we stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing, and we support all the oppressed people all over the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free DRC, free Sudan, free Lebanon, free Palestine. And with all of that being said, it's also important for me to say that queer and trans lives matter, and trans folks deserve joy and fulfillment in every facet of their lives, especially in these very, very uncertain times. And with that, hello everyone. I am Valiant Duran. I use he and his pronouns. I'm a TTRPG performer, GM, Twitch Ride streamer, and your host for this evening. And you can find me all on the internet at Valiant Duran and also Spirit Bear. And tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing our amazing guests. They are a game designer creating tabletop games and music under the name No Road Home. They like to design games about strange and magical places, the everyday moments that occur there, and the sublime. Please, everyone, welcome to the Dicey Banter chair, Takuma. Takuma, please introduce yourself to the folks.
Hi, I'm Takuma. I use any pronouns. Yeah, I mean that pretty much covers it. um,
I love being able to do my guest's bio before they can say anything about themselves.
it's just that I don't need anything longer than that. That's fine. You can find me at noroadhome.itch.io on at itch and also on Blue Sky. That's also my Blue Sky handle. So
Thank you so much. And Takuma, it's so awesome to have you in our Dicey Banner chair. And folks, if you are enjoying tonight's Dicey Banner, please consider donating, leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be used to tip myself and our guests to show your appreciation. Use exclamation point donate in chat to support us. And we'll be speaking about all things Takuma as well as their amazing games. So please use exclamation point games to get a list of all the links of the games that you could check out that we will be mentioning today, and also use exclamation point guests to find out all the areas and places that you can find Takuma, not only their website but also games and their socials, and go and follow them. I'll wait right now. Go ahead and click that. There we go. Thank you very, very much. And if you want to support Dicey Banner and get early access to episodes before they're released, use as we should point Patreon to pledge to our Patreon. Even at the free tier, you get exclusive news of all the secret projects I have in the back burner. And with
exciting.
that, I know it's very exciting. It's very. I've got so many secrets. I'm just in the quagmire of secrets and not being able to say anything about them. But with that, let us jump right in to our interview proper. I have to ask you, talk about like how did you get here? How did you end up in this particular industry? How did you get into before we get into the industry part? How did you end up in the niche of a hobby that is TTRPGs?
It's I don't think it's a particularly long story actually.
Okay.
I'm mainly here because a friend that I met in community college recommended that I listen to Friends at the Table, and
Oh.
that kind of just opened it all up to me. I
Mm.
started playing tabletop games in sixth grade, actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I went to a weird charter school, and they had a game design class that you could do, and it really wasn't anything. We just we played D&D and we made levels in Neverwinter Nights.
This is okay. This is a new one for Dicey Banner. You know, usually let me tell you the like composition of origin
Mhm.
stories that we typically have for our guests. We have
Yeah.
I started playing D&D 3.5. I listened and or watched Critical Role. We had a few folks that like played Shadowrun or Call of Cthulhu, right? Game design class.
I mean, it
That's
was
a new one.
still D&D 3.5. That was what
Oh,
we ended up playing for a lot of the
the
class.
trend
But
continues. The trend continues here at Dicey Banter. That is okay, but that's so deeply cool. And you were you all other than playing D&D, were you all like designing levels? Were you all like game designing other games or looking at other TTRPG systems? No,
not
not at that
really. I mean,
point.
it was a long time ago. I don't remember it that much. But this, I think that was the first year that that school was open, also.
Oh wow, okay.
So it was everything was a mess.
Listen, I can empathize with that because I went to the school on its like second year of of like being founded, and it was fine. But we could it does have that that feeling of the school
Oh,
hasn't been here for very long. That only if you were a student there that you could feel and understand. And then you return a few years later and you're like, this place is unrecognizable. We were a skeleton when this when this was a thing. All right, that's okay. That's really cool. You made levels in Neverwinter Nights. Y'all played a lot of D&D. So at what point did the kind of like gaming of D&D and I presume other TTRPGs came later? How did that transition into becoming a designer? At what point did you go, ah, yes, I like to think about probability and math a little bit more and maybe as a job?
It was so it was a while before I played tabletop games again.
Mm,
After that class, I like
okay.
didn't touch tabletop games until community college, really. So there was a long gap in between where I did some like chat RP and stuff. And importantly, in high school, I took an improv class,
All
um,
right.
which has like little games
Mm-hmm.
with rules and structure, and
Mm-hmm.
improv has its own overarching rules, and that kind of stuck with me as I went to community college and I took a creative writing class, and I also started playing D&D again, and I listened to Friends of the Table, and it all just kind of mixed together to be like, oh, I can do the writing bit.
Mm.
I can do like really simple games
Okay.
based on the improv stuff that I was doing, and then the Friends of the Table stuff was also like, and here's some examples of
Mm.
like simpler, more straightforward, like improv driven games.
Mm-hmm.
So then that got me looking at a bunch of indie games from the 2010s, and yeah, it just kind of snowballed like that.
That is a wild journey to be on to because I mean we're going to be talking about this quite a bit, but there is huge a huge overlap between improv and theater with TTRPGs and the way not only we conduct ourselves within the TTRPG space, but also the kind of like culture, I guess, for lack of a better term, the culture that we have and hold here,
Yeah.
which is really, really cool. But we'll talk more about that later. Stay tuned, viewers. If you want to hear about that, you have to stay tuned. All right. So now we've heard about your origin story. We've heard about your pathways into how you became a game designer. I kind of want to tap more into this sort of like vibes that you have as a game designer. You talk about designing games about strange magical places, the everyday moments that happen there, the sublime. What does that mean to you?
Um, so many things. The Strange and Magical Places is first and foremost both exploring new places,
Mm,
exploring familiar places with a kind of new eye,
mm,
and yeah, kind of seeing how places develop over time. Um, and yeah, the like strange and magical bit is, that there's all sorts of things that feel magical, even if,
mm.
and like sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Um, I really like all sorts of like weird seasonal events and things like festivals and
Mhm,
meteor showers. I
mhm,
really like to watch the Perseids.
mhm.
We went out to watch the comet Tsushinchan Atlas.
Oh
Was it
wow!
that came through a bit ago?
Yeah, that
Managed
was
to
a while
get
ago.
a couple of pictures of that. Yeah,
Oh, that's so
yeah.
cool. I think my husband went to go look too.
A lot of this is the nights, like the aurora too. Um, but also just like exploring cities and
Mm,
ruins and things like yeah, there's
mm.
just like random stuff in the woods, in like New Hampshire where I spent a lot of time growing up, or like
Mm,
when we went on a trip to Venice and we were
mm,
walking around the back streets of Venice just on our own
mm.
outside of the supervision of this field trip, and we were just kind of lost for a couple hours, and that was great. um, or even just like Montreal too. Just yeah, I really like exploring places and getting to know them and finding all the weird little bits that maybe aren't necessarily like
Mm,
the big draw, like the big tourist attractions, but just like, oh,
mm.
this is like how people are living here, and this is really cool, even though it's like this little thing that's like on this corner.
No, I really love that. And I think that shines through in your game design, especially on in games like Alone on a Journey and Stewpot. They are these game we'll be talking more about their structure and why they are the way that they are in a second. But I think there's something very interesting in one of your styles that I've noticed of having a a collection of experiences that exist within in a game in a little book that folks can like venture on and have like an experience kind of like different facets of an experience or multiple experiences within a collection of things, which is really really cool. We'll get more into that in a second. So this is a question I ask to all of my game designers when they sit in the Dicey Banter chair, and that is, what is a Takuma core game? What is a Takuma core game? You've got a vision board. I'm giving you little push pins. There's lots of images on the ground. What's in it?
Oh,
Someone's
I
making a
mean,
Pinterest board about it.
the one I just played
Mhm.
that is rattling around in my brain is 1000 times resist,
Ooh, I don't think I've heard of this one.
um, which is a video game, but um, it does this really cool thing where it's mixing kind of a near future timeline, which is, you know, presented as the past, and this like far future present. Um, and that past timeline is like very familiar. It mostly takes place in like a single apartment,
Mm,
and some parts in a school. Um, and think it does this really incredible job of
mm,
contrasting these like everyday high school moments, you know, arguing with your parents like a stuffed whale plushie, with these like really wild sci-fi themes and weird stuff going on, you know,
mm,
alien invasion and a
mm,
disease that's affecting everyone on the surface of the planet, and these generation ships that are going underwater into the ground.
mm,
Like, even in these like extraordinary circumstances, there are like really important everyday moments that get passed down across generations,
mm.
and that hold that kind of meaning still.
That it knowing your games, that feels accurate. Yep. It's these little cute pockets of time, space, and like emotion that I noticed that you like gravitate towards, and kind of like experiencing it from different lenses as well, that I've noticed that you really really enjoy. Yeah, that this game also sounds really really cool, and I might have to check it out and play it because this is something I would really enjoy, I think.
Please
uh
do. Everyone should go play it. It's
I will
like
have a
recency
link to it.
bias, but
I have a link to it if I find it. I have a link to it in the in the chat right now. Future Val, do that. Thank you. I love this. All right. Thank you so much for humoring me on my many introductory questions that I wanted to throw at you. I guess now we get to talk about your games and your approaches to game design and how they manifest in games like Stewpot, which once more, congratulations on getting picked up by Evil Hat, and
thank you.
also for your successful crowdfunding campaign. Congratulations. I did. There was a there was a tiny moment after Big Bad Con when I was like looking up all of your stuff, and I saw the game, and I saw that it was for $999. Um, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? I was like, what happened? Is this a glitch? Do I need to message them? I understand why. I understand why. But I did find it very, very funny when I first saw it. Um, but yes, you congratulations on getting Stupot picked up by Evil Hat as well as being successfully crowdfunded. Um, let's talk about it. So Stupot, for folks who are at home, use exclamation point games to get the link to it, is a small collection of games. And what it lets you do is that you're a retired adventurer, and you are running a tavern, and you're settling down into a town. You're there with your old adventuring party, and in typical adventuring fashion, shenanigans ensue. Um, you're running a tavern. You got to feed folks, got to bartend, you got to handle a tavern brawl, all that good stuff. And it is, as I mentioned, it is a collection of small games. So I have to ask you, Takuma, what was the origin or inspiration point behind Stupot? How did this idea like manifest in your mind?
Yeah, I originally came up with it for a game jam. There was
Mm.
a Friends of the Table inspired game jam in like March or April of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was really into rollable tables,
Mm.
and stuff like that at the beginning. I mean, I still am, but
Me looking at you hasn't actually changed.
hard to say. But yeah, originally it was just like a really quick little thing where I had
Mm.
a 1 to 6 table of just like different scenes that could happen. And that was it.
Mm.
And I didn't even really like write that out fully, but
Mm.
it started with like these 6 scenes. Um, and then I was playing like Firebrands and The Sundered Land, and other games that were like these mini game collections. And I was like, oh, instead of being limited to just, a short prompt for the whole, like
Mm.
it can be a whole game. It can be a whole game on its own.
Oh,
And that felt like it lent itself really well to the like improv game based design stuff I was thinking about.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, it just kind of went from there.
That is like really cool that you made this for a game jam and then decided to kind of like return to this game and make it, because I feel like a lot of game designers I felt this multiple times. I just made a game for a game jam called I think it was like a 36 word, yeah, 36 word
Yeah.
RPG game jam, which was very very fun. Also very hard to make a game in 36 words. I thought, hey, last year I did 24. 36, that's extra words. I can do extra words. How did I find myself immediately in the same quagmire of like, I wrote too much? How did this happen? And I'm very, very keen on expanding on the game that I made for that. Um, and but it's also not. It's also really hard to go back into a game that you've made that's this kind of like concise, like kind of like wrapped up experience that was meant to match a game jam, and then expanding on it. What was that process like? How long did it take you to kind of like make Stewpot into this not necessarily fulfill. I'm not necessarily talking about like manufactured fulfillment, like it's complete, it's a book in your hand. More of like, when did the full shape of the game actually like take shape in your mind, and how long did it take you to expand from what it was to the fully formed game that existed in your mind?
Yeah. So the first kind of like public release of it that I did
Mm,
was a year and a half later, at the first Big Bad Con I went to in
mm,
2019. Um, I was playtesting it before that, but yeah, like I did that game jam and then I set it aside, right? Like I didn't come back to it for a while. Um, I think I started working on it earnestly like at the end of that year. So it took about 6 7 months before I just kind of sat down and was like, okay, what does this actually look like? And I
mm,
wrote a couple games in between that time. Actually, Alone Among the Stars was one of those, and Chess Two Kingdoms was another one of those.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that right now. I'm gonna do some other stuff. Okay, I've made a couple games that have some of the stuff that I want to do in this bigger one.
Mm.
Let's sit down. Let's start working on it. Um, and yeah, I forget which mini game I wrote first, but I think it Glass of the Gods was an early one.
Mm.
Um, And I think once I had a good solid game down, I was like, okay, this I can see what this is like. Like I just want
Mm.
all the other ones to like feel cohesive like this and feel like a really good scene. And yeah,
Mm.
I just need to string these together.
So I believe that like stringing them together is an appropriate sort of like descriptor, because the stew pot is a collection of like small games, and um, when there's like designing small games, and then there's designing small games plural to be a part of like an experience of one collection. And I kind of want to hear more about the process of how you decided how many sort of like gaming experiences or little games should exist within Stewpot or other game collections. I mean, Alone on the Journey also has a similar premise of having multiple games and experiences within a collection. How do you, as a designer, kind of like one go, all right, these are the specific games I want within this thematic juncture, and or when do you go, all right, that's enough games to have in one? Because I saw this and I went, dang, Takuma's better than me. I would have kept going. This would be a never-ending project. This is why I can't do it. I'll just keep making more tiny games and putting it in one collection and never releasing it.
I've been tempted to do a like slice of life big game where each game it's just like a deck of cards. So there's 54 or no, 52 games,
Uh, wow.
which like I think about it. One of these days I might do it.
I want to see you do it. I sat here and I was like, dang, Taco better than me. But then you said that, and I was like, actually, no, be worse. actually, no. Actually, no, why stop there? Get the tarot, 72 cards. Let's go.
I did this with Promptober to
Oh, yeah?
2.5 years ago. It was like October of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
Sin ran it. I don't remember. I think it was Sin.
Mm.
And I wrote a short little game for every day of that month. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I there is a part of me that's like I could make so many more little stew pot games, and like I did for the Kickstarter. Like I made
Mm.
stretch goal games, um, and there's definitely more, but I have a pretty strong sense of like when I think a game like really works,
Mm.
and like plays well and feels good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very like I'm a very vibes based designer.
We'll be talking more about that in a second.
Yeah. And most of the games in Stewpot, I was like, yeah, this works really, really well. This feels good. Like this is here. And then there are a bunch of other ideas that I like
Mm.
tried to make work, and it like didn't happen. And there are a few games where I was like, okay, this needs to be here.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if it feels the best for me, but I play tested those ones like extensively, and people were like, "Oh yeah, this is great. Like, love this. This works
Okay.
well." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's out of my hands. Those are
Yep.
written. That's fine." So yeah, it's kind of a combination of like, okay, this is the like most important stuff to me that I feel like works really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the like last couple bits that are probably necessary. We'll see if they work. The stuff that works, like people are gonna tell me that it's fine, and I'll keep those, and then that's that.
Yeah. No. Listen, that makes a ton of sense, and like you've brought up a very important interesting point. This is actually the point that we bonded over during Big Bad Con when we met, and it is being a vibes based game designer. Um, Before we expound more about that, what does that what does that mean to you as a designer? Like vibes based design. For me, for me, what that means is I the way I design is I imagine in my mind how the game plays, and if I notice If I feel this might be a snag, then I will design around, like I'll design around it. I kind of just have a little imaginary wheel that's turning in my head, that's running sequences of how this game may be played,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, this feels fine. Or I'd make a game and I'll go, this feels like this might be broken. We shall see. But how does that manifest for you in your experience?
I definitely have a similar thing going on where I'm like, there's a stage where I'm writing it and I'm like, oh yeah, this mechanic, this is cool, this is great. Like, yeah,
I can fight
um,
God. I'm so good.
yeah. I feel like at this point in designing, like I have a decent idea of
Hmm.
how well a thing works and how mechanics work together and how it clicks and like what's too much and what's not enough.
Mm.
Um, and then I take it into play, and then play is really where the vibes are very important, right? Where I'm like, it has it or it doesn't for me. Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to always feel like this is the best game I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
Like I talked about earlier, there are mini games in Stupa where I'm like, I'm not sure about it, but everyone else likes it, so I guess it's fine. Um, but yeah, most of my game design is like, okay, I've played this a bunch. It feels good. It
Mm.
feels like it has the juice. It has that like spark to it that is the reason we're playing tabletop games for.
Mm.
That remind me of my favorite moments from when I was doing like improv and theater and all of that,
Mm.
or even like and a lot of other art forms, right? Like whenever you're like reading something or watching something and it's like it has that like we're just chasing that.
Mm. No, I love that a lot because yeah, that is what we're chasing after. A lot of the best experiences in TTRPGs is that feeling, and it is when everything cohesively hits together to create climactic moments, like deeply resonant moments, and folks are able to do the things that they want to do and have fun while doing it, which makes a lot of sense. And I do love the idea of like, it either has it or it or it doesn't.
You know
I know.
what you're playing.
Sometimes I write an idea, especially for game jams, right? This is usually when it happens. Is it
Yeah.
is most occurrent is when I am prepping for a game jam, or in I say prepping for a game jam as if I'm organized and have a handle on this. No, most of the time it manifests as I see a game jam online. I'm like, oh, ah, this is a great one to join. I have 4 days. Okay. I guess I'm making a micro setting in 4 days. And I remember writing through like three different ideas, and I go, yeah, no, that's not happening. It's you just write a thing and you go, this isn't going anywhere. I don't know if that's the ADHD in me where I'm like, the hyperfixation is not strong enough in this thing to carry me through to the end of the project. You're not excited. It's a similar experience. Oh my god, incredible. Um, neurodivergent game designers, we should have a roundtable, just talk about how we vibes-based game design, and our other counterparts who are actually better with numbers, and see and watch us collide. That would be amazing. I should do that. All right, so that's Stewpot. So Stewpot's been picked up by Evil Hat. Do we have a release date that we can tell folks so they can go and grab themselves a fun little copy?
Uh, February 10th. That is
February 10th.
next week from the time of this recording. It is out next Monday.
It
Uh,
is next week by by the time this recording has been done. But by the time this recording is released to you all, it would have already been out. So there's no excuse. Go and buy it. You're
Go
not
get
waiting for anything. Go get it right now. And I know I've been telling you for the past, because there's going to be a couple episodes that air before this one. And in those two episodes, I said go and back things on for Steam Quest, this is another thing to spend your money on. Go and support Takuma, please. Thank you.
Mhm.
And with that, as we are wrapping up this section, folks, it is a great time for us to go and get a quick break. And please get up, stretch, pet your pets. Tell Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And when we come back, we'll be speaking about improv and theater, process optimization, and why combat feels like a lot sometimes in D&D. All that and more when we come back after a break. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the little trailer at the end. See you in a bit. and enjoyed the trailer during the break. Uh, Welcome back. I hope you got up, stretched, pet your pets, and told them Mr. Van Doren loves them very, very much. And we're back with Takuma, and we're going to be speaking more about game design, but specifically about process optimization and improv theater interacting with TTRPGs. But before we get into all that, folks, you have several commands that you can make use of. Use exclamation point games to check out all of Takuma's games, and exclamation point guests to find all of their links and websites that you can follow, engage with, and purchase things from. Thank you very much. Please support our incredible guests. And with that, let us bring it back to game design, talking about game design. And one of the big things that we talk about in game design is D&D combat. Why is it the way that it is? As someone who's played it from 3.5, I've only the only D&D I've ever played has been 5e and the newest update to basically the base 5e rule set. Um, as someone who's played this game from 3.5, um, why why is D&D like this? Why is combat like that? Why is it that the first ever campaign I was in, we had to set aside maybe 5 hours of our session? We had a one shot that ran for about 13 hours.
Oh, that's a
Um,
nightmare. Oh
I,
no.
the best part
Oh.
was our GM. God bless his heart. I love him very very much. But he was just like, let's do this one shot as a little break in our campaign. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. It's like tangentially related story wise to the campaign, meant to be a little teaser for us. But we got to play different characters, and it was a dungeon crawl. And I guess that's where we should have known that this was not going to take a lovely 3.5 and 4 hours. Um, yeah, it took us 13 hours, and I was based. I am still based in Malaysia. By the time I just moved back, and we were playing in UK time, so I was up at like 2 a.m.
Oh.
So we already got done at like 3 p.m. my time. I've experienced most of the cycle of the day before we were done with this game. So yeah, why is it like this? What's up with that in your opinion?
God, I mean, there's so many reasons, right? I mean, there's like the wargaming origins, there's the like video game influence, there's
Mm.
ugh, so much. There's so many factors. Um,
Sometimes you
but
introduce
yeah,
one too many enemies. Everyone's rolling terribly. All that good stuff.
yeah, but yeah, a lot of why it feels slow. Um, because I've played video game versions of these games ever since I started playing them. Also, and the
Mm,
video game versions are so much faster. It actually
yeah,
feels good. I like D&D combat in a video game,
yeah.
but when it comes to running that on paper with people, with a bunch of people, it
Mm,
slows it down a ton. It slows it down
yes.
so much.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean that's a lot of where this
Mm,
process optimization blog post comes in.
mm. For the folks at home, how would you define process optimization for so the folks at home can uh, understand us as we are probably going to use this phrase a lot during our discussion of this blog post. By the way, the link should be available in chat right now. Go and click it right now to go and read it. It's a good read. It's a short, good read.
Short-ish,
Sure.
ish.
I need to remember that I have a different definition of short. I do need to remember that I have a different definition of short, considering I'm a lawyer. This
Oh
is
my
short.
god.
This is short to me. I do this a lot where I'm like, oh, it's such a short read. It's like 12 pages.
It is for how dense it is. I would agree. It is short for how much information it packs in there.
I think that's why
For
I think
yeah.
typically so what we're referencing, folks, if you haven't clicked the link yet, we're referencing an incredible post by Binary Star Games, which is titled "Process Optimization TTRPGs and How I Learned to Start Worrying and Love the and Love the Operation." And it is a really really great blog post talking about all of these things. It's about process. I'll let Takuma kind of like elaborate more on it, but it's talking about this thing that we've been discussing, which is why does D&D do why do we feel like this? Why is combat taking so long? Why shouldn't you have why it's a bad idea to have maybe 7 players at your table, which we did have in that campaign that I was referencing.
Yeah. For me, a lot of this has to do with momentum. A
Mm,
lot of that feeling of like a game having that
mm,
spark to me is has to do with like how the game flows and how it feels moving forward, how the story's moving, how like quickly you can come up with ideas and how it feels to put those ideas together. Um, and the thing that this blog post talks about
mm,
is that in video games there's the idea of frame rates, like
yeah.
30 FPS, 60 FPS. And what happens when there's too much stuff going on uh, is that you'll start to lose frames and things will start looking choppy and
Mm,
like stuff will lag sometimes. And it really can interrupt like the feeling of play.
yeah.
So optimizing helps that not happen. Optimizing helps things run smoother. It saves memory space. It
Mm,
doesn't make your computer load in so many things at once, or like loads them in lower quality models farther away, or like stuff like that, right? It's all these little shortcuts
mm,
that make a game run smoother, and it's less interruptive to your play experience. And
yeah.
there's a similar kind of thing in tabletop games, where with you know D&D 3.5, for example, there
Mm,
are a ton of rules that will cause play to kind of be interrupted,
mm,
um, because you have to go look something up, you have to consult something, you have to
yeah.
even just like rolling a die and waiting for it to do a thing, like it can be part of play, it can feel disruptive, like depending on the context. um, and yeah, a thing that I find I care a lot about is keeping up the momentum of a game, uh,
Mm-hmm,
keeping you in that feeling of, oh wow, this is really cool. Like I'm telling the story and it's like flowing and it feels
mm,
good, and like keeping you in that as much as possible by like cutting out stuff or shortcutting stuff,
mm,
or making one rule like do a lot of different things.
mm,
Um, in the case of Stupod, it's separating
mm,
each of these specific scenes into their own thing, so you don't have to worry about the other ones.
yeah.
In order to get the most out of this one scene type, all you have to think about is this one minigame.
Mm. No, that is a great explanation. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. And you brought up a thing that's like super interesting that kind of like opened my eyes a little bit as well. Because as a vibes based game designer, uh, and someone who came into game design 2 years ago. What is time? Yeah, I guess 2 years ago. Um, I didn't really like take any like formal lessons or read up stuff. I a lot of my lessons and guidance were like reading games and feeling the vibes of those games and hoping to either divert away from it or like try to replicate a similar feeling in the way that I design games. So when we were having a conversation about process optimization during our production meeting, it was very much of like, oh, I understand this from the perspective of a player who's played D&D and had to be in the dungeon crawl for 13 hours, which was at which point by the end I was like, I know we're meant to die because of plot. Kill me faster. Looks at my DM, kill me faster. I'm sorry, I'm so tanky. Kill me faster. And and hearing about that and actually reading this article, I realized, wow, even the normal processes that we associate as like, oh, this is all you have to do to run the combat is actually a longer process. the Binary Star Games actually goes over like, hey, yeah, so what it looks like is you roll a dice, and then you figure out what the person's AC is. If it hits, you roll damage, and then you minus the damage. But then what happens is that this four-step process, when you actually break it down, turns into a 21-step process, because there's these moments of, like you mentioned, like looking up value, like consulting something, or whether it's your character sheet or your book, uh, and even on the GM side, like if you've got 5 6 different enemies, you're like consulting each of their stat blocks. You're consulting how much HP Goblin number 3 has, at this point, and things like that. There's a lot of kind of like smaller tasks that are being built into the operations there. And that was really, really eye opening for me to realize how many steps there are in a simple action like that in game design. As someone who's also a fellow vibe space game designer, but also has this wealth of experience, and an enjoyer of this post, uh, do you find yourself like thinking a lot about the operations, and in this great detail when you're designing games, or do you think you're at a point now where you have a very, very strong sense of, uh, your like boundaries, the limits, and the play space that you are in?
I have rough ideas of
Mm,
like there are definitely times where I can read something and be like, "Oh, yeah, this is too much. This is
mm,
something's got to go." Like even before I play it. But there are definitely times where I'm in play and something just doesn't work the way I want it to, or it
mm.
just like the most common thing for me is when there's a prompt and it takes a long time for a player to answer it.
Oh, okay.
And I think this is one of the most common problems with a lot of like more narrative forward indie games
Yes, yes, yes,
where
yes.
the prompt and the context it is in,
Mm,
if it is not set up correctly, can slow things down a ton because you're like, what am I supposed to come up with here? Like what I don't
mm.
I don't like that. I don't like this idea. I can't quite get all the details to come together.
Yeah.
And that is a thing that I notice a lot. Um And then there's like other stuff like when there's too many conditional things like, oh, there's this temporary thing that could happen to you that gives, this one-off bonus or this penalty.
Mm,
And then you have to account for this other thing like yeah, I think modifiers, conditional stuff, um, I notice those a lot. I try to minimize those as much as possible, like, have like one or
mm.
two at a time going.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are kind of the off the top of my head the first things that I would
Yeah.
notice or keep track of.
You bringing up a really important point here, because I feel like there is, um especially for folks who are like newer to this space, or like newer to tabletop role playing games. I think this may be, a trepidation, or maybe an incorrect conclusion that one could draw from discussions about how D&D combat can be bogged down, which is, oh, crunchy games make combat slow, make processes slow, therefore not fun to play. Sort of conclusion that can be drawn, but that you bring up a really important point, that even narrative games, in its sort of like openness or lack of cohesion, can uh can bog down play through just not having enough to work with, for folks. So drawing from an empty cup almost, in that sense. Because I remember, love Quest, one of my favorite rules like games ever. Love it. I will admit, the first few times I had to run it as a GM, the kind of like really open combat and, vibes based initiative, um, did put me in a position where I was like, oh, okay, how am I supposed to do it? Because in my mind, as part of the game design, game mastering, role, is to also make the process as smooth for my players, so they could just focus on being their characters and doing cool shit, and there was definitely a few moments where I was like, oh god, what am I meant to do here? And I've also played several prompt-based games, but I was like, oh, that was not the scene that I thought was going to be happening after this. How are we going to make that one work? Which is an interesting challenge in improv, which is how I usually take it. Is like, oh, this is a challenge in improv, but I can also say that it bogs down gameplay for quite a bit, and I'm very very curious about like how your approach is to ensure that you're able to minimize those occurrences with the prompts. Do you make sure that they're within the same sort of like thematic element? Because I feel like with especially with roll tables, I feel like there's always a temptation to put one out there thing inside of the roll table. Like, oh, just one weird thing that's in there. But what is your approach to like building out the roll tables and keeping that sort of like potential snag in mind?
Yeah. There's so many different ways to account for this.
Mm,
Um, this kind of comes from improv for me a lot, right? Because
mm,
it's you have the game that you're playing, you have the basic rules, and then often you will ask the audience for a variable.
mm,
I need a place, or I need an object, or something like that, right?
mm,
Um, and I think that juxtaposition is very important. I think specificity is very important,
mm,
but within a certain range, because if you get too specific, then it's really hard to make it work with stuff. But
yeah,
if you nail the right kind of area, you mean like, okay, I'm working in this limited little sandbox,
mm,
and I have, you know, a kind of limited range of things that I could pull from. I want that one. And I think that's kind of how I tend to design is like the the way the prompts are set up in the game, in that mechanic or something, like it's fairly specific. It's a fairly specific scenario. Um, and then the prompt will flavor that scenario in a way that gives you a little bit of freedom, but like direct, but pushes you in a direction um, that can go a few ways off the top of my head. But
mm.
there's stuff that like immediately you will jump to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And all of this talk about prompt-based stuff and rolling tables is making me go, I kind of want to make one. I haven't made one of those yet. I should go make one at some point. So that's very fun. So, so thank you
Go
for
make a
chatting.
table. Everyone go make a rollable table. They're great.
A challenge for everyone in chat right now for the remainder of this Dicey Banner interview. Why don't you make a quick, I don't know, a D6 table for me, just for a scene. It can be any kind of scene. Bonus points if it's trans or gay. What did these points give you or do for you? Find out. You only know if you make the table. Amazing. Thank you for chatting with me about the potential snacks that can also exist within narrative games. And I guess I'm gonna ask you this question because I know the article has their conclusion, which y'all should read. Um, but I want to hear like your opinion on this, and which is there a way to fully optimize? Or are we just chasing the sun there? Can we min max? Can we min max game design? Make the most optimized process imaginable? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, yeah, there's a similar thing of you definitely can to a degree, but everyone runs a game differently. And
Mm,
yeah, I mean that's the eternal struggle with tabletop games, right? Is
yeah.
is you are always no one is going to interpret the rules that you wrote the exact same way that you intended them. Um, and so you just have to do your best to make it be a good experience no matter what happens, but even then
Mm,
it's really hard to account for everything. Um, which I
absolutely.
think comes back to a lot of like you're making this thing for you.
Mm,
And I do think that it is possible to optimize something for you as much as possible and then hope that that will translate to as many people as possible, and then depending on the designer, you might tweak that so that it works for more people if you think that what works for you is really narrow,
Mm.
or maybe you're just like, this is my sicko shit, like y'all can
This
deal
is
with
my
it.
this is my little sicko. It's fine. This is a treat for me. No, I fully hear you on that because I I'm also of the opinion that you could optimize like for yourself and or for like like a specific experience that you are trying to like create. 'Cause I think that is possible. Whether that process is going to translate well to another person or but with that, thank you for chatting with me about process optimization. I think this is a great point for us to transition to improv and theater. We kind of like talked a lot about improv and theater here, but I think I need to ask you a very, very important question first. That has to do with the state of the tabletop space. Why are there so many theater kids here? Why are we here? How did this happen? I say as one of them.
That's a great question. Who could say? Who
Who
could
could?
say? Um, for my serious answer, I know there are a number of people who have improv backgrounds, and I think improv especially is a very natural
Mm,
kind of extension of tabletop games, especially indie games, because
mm-hmm,
it's operating in a lot of the same ways. A lot of the like improv games that I played like would fit right into like little LARPs or something.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I think that's just like the line between improv and LARP and tabletop stuff is like very thin, almost non-existent.
mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like there are a lot of like D&D, like comedy-based improv podcasts. Like there's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of that overlap.
oh yeah.
Um, and then theater, I feel like it's hard to say. I think some of it has to do with like characters and like playing characters and making those kinds of decisions.
Mm-hmm,
Um, thinking about how a character's traits and their
mm,
pasts like affect how they're acting now and like really getting into that role playing.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I think there's also stuff about, I mean, theater, you have rules, you have a constrained play space, you have um a certain amount of space, like you have to do stuff on the stage a certain way, you have to build sets a certain way.
mm,
Your script is given to you. Um, and there's a lot of similarities of like, okay, you're given these sets of tools.
mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with them? How are you going to make these characters like move in this situation?
Yeah. So that makes sense to me, and which makes me think that I guess TTRPGs are is improv with more steps, maybe. Um, Potentially depending on the kind of game that you have in mind. And you've spoken about your improv background, and you also talked about improv games and how they have rules and they have like their games, so they have rules and they have a process of a system in which you engage in to have improvisational fun. And I wanted to ask about how that like background or that sort of influence impacted you with the way you game design. How has it influenced the design choices that you've made so far?
Yeah. The first game that I ever wrote was called Conches and Cameras, and it was about wandering around a beach and picking random stuff up.
Mm,
And that was inspired by this very simple improv game where you're sitting in a chair and you reach under the chair and pull up an object.
mm,
And you're trying to imagine that object as strongly as possible. You're trying to like feel the weight of it, like notice the color, turn it around in your hands.
mm,
Um, yeah, it's like kind of an exercise more than a game, but it left a really
mm.
strong impression on me.
Yeah.
Um, because like there's only so much you can do with the constraints of fits under a chair.
Yeah.
Um, and that you're, holding with one hand or two. Um, and that led me to the beach thing of like, okay, here's a set environment. Here's what you can expect. Like I did a lot of beach cleanup days when I was living
Mm.
in California. And I really liked those because there's like, okay, there's a bunch of trash, but there's also like weird stuff that you didn't expect.
Imagine.
Yeah. um, you'll like pull a weird rusted bicycle thing out of like the muck, and it's like, oh, what is that?
How did it
Oh,
end up here? Oh,
yeah.
rude, yeah.
Just like whatever bottles, this wooden boat from like hundreds of miles away. It's a little
Hmm.
model boat, or yeah, you can find all sorts of weird stuff on the beach. But like, there's a certain range of things that you're expecting.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that combination of okay, this is the constrained space that
Hmm.
you are going to come up with ideas in, and then you should pay attention to how it feels, what it looks like, um, how you turn it around, if it has a smell or something, and like tuning into the senses, even though that thing isn't there at all, like
Mm.
reaching for those kinds of details to make it feel more real.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that aspect of like, okay, what's an emotion? What's a small detail? What's a thing about the world that I can give a player to make coming up with a thing easier, to like place
Mm.
them more in that moment? That's kind of been the thing that's stuck with me.
I really like that because um being able to read a prompt and come up with I love the idea of like having to like imagine an object that you just manifested out of thin air and give it weight, meaning, and significance. Uh, and as someone who also grew up close to a beach, you can find some weird crap in there. Let me tell you. And you sit there and you wonder, how did this happen? Um, who's the sad person who lost their wedding ring down here? Something I actually I found someone's wedding
Oh
ring.
my god.
While I was building sandcastles as like a 5 year old. It was very very funny. I brought it to my mom. My mom was just like, ah, maybe don't take that home. I was also my family is also a superstitious Indian family, so we also were big on please don't pick up random shiny things you find.
Yeah.
There's some bad superstition with that. Don't do that. And we're like,
Oh,
okay, fine, don't do that. No, thank you for explaining that kind of like improvisational influence within your game design. And I guess my question next for you is that when it's very very clear that improv is within the DNA of a lot of the games that you have designed. Um, is there like intentional game design choices that you make that make a TTRPG experience theatrical, or are there games out there of which you are like, oh yes, this is a game that really encourages players or folks to kind of like engage in theatrics and the drama that would then ensue. I guess D&D is one of them with with the story, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
There are a lot of LARPs like I was talking about
Mm.
before, where it's basically the same. Like there was this one improv game where you had two people,
Hmm.
and person A says, "It's a beautiful day." Person B says, "Not for some of us." And person A replies, "Stop, just stop." And there are a handful of like games that I read early on that had similar
Mm.
scripts for characters. Um, oh, I can't remember the name, but there was one about uh two aliens of different species that were drifting in space, running out of oxygen. Two lesbian aliens, and you're sitting on two office spinny chairs, and you can only like barely touch. And you have a list of lines to say in your like last hour of oxygen together.
That is deeply how is this so deeply tragic and funny? at the
Yeah.
same it's the same sort of like dark comedy that I like associate with like Heathers or something, where it's just this is so sad, but also this is so deeply absurd that this is occurring right now. No, that's a lot of LARPing does feel like a very, very easy transition for kind of like live theater in play and performance, but we also have that with actual plays. And now
Mhm.
in actual plays we have web fests, and we
Yeah.
have I can speak to Transparent RPG, we have a dramaturg who helps us engage into like deep character work and things like that. I'm very curious to hear, like, I know you're primarily a game designer, but as someone who's consumed actual play in your life, um, where do you think this medium is going to go, especially with the way we're developing and the new ventures of theater that we're engaging in? Um, what sort of realms do you think we'll be able to experience maybe 2 3 years from now? Because it feels like we've made leaps and bounds over the course of 5 years, even.
That's a good question. It's interesting because yeah, like I am kind of disconnected from the
Hmm.
actual play space. Like I've been on some in the past.
Hmm.
I have a hard time watching streams and like long form video content
Okay,
like that.
fair. Hmm.
I do like I got into the space through podcasts through Friends of the
Mm.
Table. But that's kind of the one that I
Mm.
managed to listen to. I've listened to like episodes of stuff here and there. Um, it's it's interesting
Mm.
because I have also attempted to make a bunch of them. Most of those fell through. Some of them saw the light of day, and I think that there are going to be more and more games that feel really suited for that kind of thing, but
Mm.
that also it's going to feel like you could do that by playing it, which is interesting.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
I see where we're going. It's the chicken and the egg. But actual play.
yeah, because I think that there's been more of a trend for pre-gen characters, like set characters that
Mm.
you choose from to play, and that you're
Mm.
embodying, and that can kind of lead to these very theatrical, dramatic moments of you like really pushing how you see this character, and not having to worry about a lot of the other aspects.
Mm.
Not having to come up with a lot of stuff about the world and things like that on the fly, or like have to think about your character and
Mm.
come up with a bunch of stuff for them. So it gives you more um, brain space,
Mm.
frees up some of that process stuff to really lean into playing a character.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think I'm seeing more of these games. Like Yaziba's is one of those. Yaziba's Bed and Breakfast is
Mm.
one of those examples. Um, a bunch of stuff that I've played in Playtest Zero recently has had characters like this that oh, Last Train to Bremen also I think
Mm.
has those characters that you choose from at the start.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see if people are doing actual plays with those and what that looks like and like
Mm.
how people react to that. Like if people are just going to watch that and be satisfied or be like, "Oh yeah, I really want to do this now. I really want to have this kind of theatrical
Mm.
experience." Um yeah.
Yeah. It is a very complicated thought, I think, because as someone who's deep in the actual play space, it's almost like I think my primary thing. Um, the Yes was Bed and Breakfast is like a huge. It's like a definitely like one of those like best examples of almost like archetypal character, like pre-generated characters which are able to kind of like. And I'm seeing more and more games that are coming out with a similar premise. I act, I made a game for a charity thing alongside Cat at Catlingun.
Hmm.
Um, and it was this. The premise of the show was we have one person make a world, and then another person make a game for said world, and then an actual play for incorporating both of those things. And in that instance, we actually also made a game which was, uh, Kat described it as Yasuo's bed and breakfast, by way of Seventh Sea, but using mechanics similar to, God, what's that game called? The name is vanished of that. The name is vanished from my head. But rolling lots of dice at once, and rolling communally, and I will say it did make a lot of the kind of like actual, like in terms of like character gen and stuff like that. There was a lot more room for us to be able to think about character relationships rather than having to think about character. But even
Yeah.
then, it was so interesting to see, and it's probably because of the people, the amazing folks we had as our performers. It was also so cool to see all these folks bring their own interesting spin on these archetypal characters, and taking the strong character choices that we put into the character proper, and then either expanding on it or choosing which ones to highlight more was really really interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess I wonder, one huge conversation we're happening that it's constantly happening. Even I get weary of it. Is this idea of like, is actual play like actual play, and is it turning more into an audio drama and things like that, and or into other forms of entertainment theater and things like that. And I guess I'm very very curious to hear, like, I guess I'm very very curious to hear about your thoughts of, I know you don't consume a ton of actual play content, but do you foresee this being a huge divergence, or do you think that this is like actual play will develop, but there's still a value in the play aspect, while we exist in the TTRPG space?
Um, like there's always going to be a place for that, right? Like
Yeah,
that's part of the reason. I know that there are a decent number of people who will watch or listen to actual plays to learn the rules.
yeah.
Um, and this is a thing that I've done where, especially with like a bigger game and a big rule book,
Mm.
um, it can be hard for me to read through it and
Oh
hard
yeah.
for me to tie all the pieces together in my head
Mm.
and know how it's supposed to play.
Yeah,
Um, and I know for me, a lot of the appeal of actual play sometimes is hearing the game played and hearing the rules
mm.
happen. And
Yeah,
I I don't know what
yeah,
direction
yeah,
things are going in because I'm just not tuned in like that. But I do hope that there continue to be a lot of shows that place an emphasis on that and like
yeah.
showcasing the mechanics and the rules and
Absolutely.
like seeing what happens in play, seeing what happens when you lean into the rules and really like go for it
Yeah.
and um yeah,
That's
kind of
yeah. I agree with you, and I think I do agree. There's always going to be a place for it. As someone who is in actual play, I mean, nothing. I feel like there's no other feeling of like climactic dread where you are in a situation, capital STM situation. It's you and your party, and you know, you just watch one of your party members like make a choice, it didn't pan out, and you're all just sitting there in that tension. It's felt in the room, and it's felt in the audience as well, I think. And
yeah.
and also, to echo your like improv and like the thought about improv games, right? Like being able to engage with the rules and having like whatever outcome that the dice has provided you, whether it's dice prompts, whatever tools is being used in a particular game. There is a special kind of like improvisational skill that comes with seeing a an outcome you did not foresee nor expect, and going, all right, time to like lean into this, and yes, and this, if I'm gonna roll 5 ones on a d6 dice pool, um then I'm gonna lean into it. Officially the lowest roll on transplanar history. That's me. Someone actually did the math. It's apparently an absurd number of
Oh my
probability
god.
rolling five once in a in 5d6 pool.
Yeah,
Um,
that's hard. That's real rare. Oh my god.
you should see my face when that happened. I just rolled it and I went, because we were playing the Wild Sea, and there's a mechanic in the Wild Sea where you cut the GM can choose to cut your top results to as a sign of how difficult the task is. And I was like,
Mhm.
don't bother. I like rolled it, and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, cut two. And I was like, don't bother. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It
It doesn't
doesn't matter.
matter. They're all bad. They're all terrible and bad. Uh, it was, yeah, and I rolled, yeah, I think it was the worst possible result that you could roll for the Wild Sea, which was a one, and if you have doubles, you roll a twist, so an additional like narrative twist needs to happen. So I rolled both those things. It was great. I had a great time. But that's I think improv and theater will always exist in TTRPGs. We will always have these discussions, I think. And even though I know you're not necessarily like involved in this space necessarily, but I'm always curious about folks who are like tangentially related or see it from the
Mhm.
outside. What y'all think about these conversations, especially someone who's like engaged in improv and the importance of improv and how core it is to a lot of TTRPGs and gameplay.
I do have one more thought on that,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
I think that, like improv games have limitations. A lot of them
Mm,
are, you know, a scene. They're sketch comedy. They're
mm,
very situational. They're, you see and play the same games a lot, and it's kind of the same.
mm.
There's only so far it can go, and I think the strength of tabletop games then, right, is being able to build on those moments and kind of chain them
Mm.
together and see how characters change and grow and how the situation evolves. Um, I don't actually know if a ton of campaign length games have figured out that long term support yet to like
Oh.
really make that long term campaign feel super satisfying.
Mm.
Um, like there are mechanics for that. I don't
Yeah.
know that I've played a game where I've been like, oh yeah, this is really adding to it. Like this is really changing the experience completely for me. In the long
Oh, I
run.
see. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a
Mm.
lot of stuff that I'm like, okay, I'm tracking over the course of all of these sessions.
Mm.
And okay, this is incrementally changed. Or, this faction wants this thing now, or this faction has made progress. And there's like, there's clocks, there's meters, there's timers. And then there's the like GM prep that you do,
Yeah.
um, moving factions around. And like, sometimes people will play a different game for a faction turn or something.
Mm.
But I wonder if there will be more games that also kind of have more of a scaffolding for long-term play and seeing how that story evolves. I'm giving you more tools that feel really tuned into that
Mm.
and that affecting the actual play space. I'm curious
I'm
about that.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely very, very curious about that as well, because you're right. That's not necessarily like a scaffolding or like a particular like structure that infrastructure that we have necessarily. I know for us on Transplay with Chaos Protocol, and this is everyone knows this, is we the one of the main premise points of the Chaos Protocol is that we change systems every arc,
Yep.
because we're going to different worlds and different so we're using different systems. Um, and we also the incredible game design brain that is Connie Chung has developed a sort of system that exists outside called I think we call it base camp or something, where we have tiny little increments of progress that exists there, and we also have a dramaturg that helps keep us like tethered, which is a more of a kind of like a theatrical bit of structure that helps us with like the growing and developing characters over
Yeah.
a long period of time. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm very very curious to see folks design that. I think that's a very very interesting challenge to have, to kind of like make real that kind of like experience of characters growing and changing, and making that a mechanic instead of a like and not necessarily just like a in narrative. I'm growing and I'm engaging with the world as a growing person. I'm very very curious. This is a very very good thought process. I'm very very curious to see who's going to design that. Amazing. I think with that, that's a great point for us to start wrapping up. Thank you,
Yeah.
Takuma, for being a guest here on Dicey Banter. It's such an honor to have you here. Please let the folks know who you are and where they can find you, and anything they should be keeping an eye out for in the coming weeks.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was a really wonderful time. And yeah, narrowedhome.itch.io, on Blue Sky and Itch. I will hopefully have a game out soon called A Blade Breaks, which is about combat, just
Mm-hmm.
about durability on weapons and combat, and
Oh,
uses other kind dice in a way that I hope makes combat both easy to run and moment to moment fast. You go from narrative beat to narrative beat in the fight,
oh,
get a
that's
whole
sick.
fight done in an hour, and have all of these cool moments and just have those cool moments. Yeah. Um,
Oh, that's sick.
hopefully that will be out real soon. But in the meantime, Stewpot, Tales from a Fantasy Tavern, available at Evil Hat, February 10th.
This is so exciting. I am so stoked for Blade Breaks. That is my shit. That's a Valiant Dorian core game. Like that.
Hell
That
yeah.
sounds like fun. I'm gonna pick that up as soon as it's out, and you should too. Use exclamation point games as well as exclamation point guests to get all of the links. Please go and support and follow Takuma in all the places where they are. And as we wrap up, thank you again for being my guest. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I've been your host, Valiant Dorian. This has been Dicey Banner. We're the TTRPG talk show where we speak to all the makers and shakers in the tabletop space. And if you want to support me or support this show, please consider pledging to our Patreon. Even at the free tier, you get access to a bunch of announcements that will take approximately a week and a half to hit the rest of my socials. You will also have access to early Dicey Banner episodes, works in progress, behind the scenes, secrets, all of that good stuff. And now's a really good time to get in on the behind the scenes secrets, because I have a thing cooking up with Monty Cook Games that you all kind of know about, that you would like to keep an eye out for. Please go and check that out. Um, yeah, please go, please go do that. Please go check that out. And support the show. And thank you so much. Please hang on. Do not press that dial. We're going to be rating somebody amazing. So hang on and go send them some Spirit Bear love. Alrighty, folks. Take care. Have a fantastic rest of your evenings. Take care. Bye.